Hi, this is another video in the Random Linux Stuff playlist. This one is a bit of a combination of two features, namely setting up a worldwritable NFS share and finding out why the sticky bit is very important with that particular share. And all of this will only take a couple of minutes. Now before we start, I can say that the commands that I use are listed in the description, if you're interested. Basically what we do is we set up an NFS server and a client that will connect to the NFS share. The NFS share will be worldwritable, which obviously means that the permissions will be open to everybody. NFS stands for Network File System and helps you to access a remote file system. Accessing in this case means that you can manage files and directories on a remote machine, but have no control over the file system. I mean that the NFS client doesn't even know what type of file system it is, or what the storage is on which the file system resides. The only thing the client sees is the amount of space that it can use in the file system to manage his files. The basic idea is that the server shares a directory and the client creates a local directory to which this shared directory will be mounted across the network. Now to access a directory, the X bit will have to be set, which luckily is the case by default. But if you want to make this directory worldwritable, all three write bits will need to be set, obviously. Now that's fine, but by doing so, this not only means that everybody can create files, but everybody can also delete files. As you probably know, a directory simply contains file names that are hard linked to an inode in the file system. So removing a file simply removes the hard link, and has absolutely nothing to do with the permissions of the file, which are in the inode and not in the directory. So if a client can delete his own files, it's also able to delete files that it doesn't own, so other users' files. In comes the sticky bit. This is a bit in addition to the execute bit, not a replacement. When the execute bit and the sticky bit are set, the users can only delete their own files and not someone else's files. The only users that can delete all files are the root user and the owner of the directory. So, taken that root owns the directory, the root user is the only one who has full power. A very nice example of this is the /tmp directory, which always has the sticky bit set. Now how do you recognize a sticky bit? Well, it's the lowercase t on the execute bit of the rest of the world. And now for a side note, if the execute bit is not set, but the sticky bit is set, then you will see a capital T. So let's do it. So I'm logged into the server and we will create the directory that we want to share. And first we make it worldwritable. And then we set the sticky bit. And when we check it, we see that it looks okay. Next thing we do is we install the nfs-utils on the server. We enable it and start NFS. And then we check its status and see that it's active. Now don't worry about this exited part. This simply means that there are no user processes running, but NFS runs as a kernel module. And then we create our share in the etc exports file. Now just to make sure, the line contains what we share, who can access, and what their permissions will be. And then we restart NFS and check our exports. Next thing we do is we set the firewall rules. We need to enable NFS, mountd and rpc-bind. So let's quickly do that. We have to do a reload, of course. Now we check whether these services are part of our zone, and we can rest assured that NFS will no longer be blocked. Then our server is fine and we move on to the client. First we install nfs-utils. We create a directory to be used as the mountpoint later on. Now let's check the server's export using chmod. And that's fine, so now let's simply mount it. And after that we run df to check it. So great, we're doing fine. Now to make sure it also gets mounted at the next reboot, we add it to the fstab file. And if you want to mount it using systemctl, there's a link in the description on how to do that. For now we simply use fstab, and to test it we actually reboot the client. And after the client is back, we check whether the remote mount is there, and it is. So now we add two users. Let's call them NFS user 1 and NFS user 2. And of course they need a password. Forgive me, but it's a very, very bad password. Now we switch user to NFS user 1. We go to the NFS Share and we create a file in the share. We next switch to NFS user 2. We list the files in the share and create our own file. And when user 2 tries to remove its colleague's file, it's not allowed, even though the directory is worldwritable. But I can remove my own file. And we're done.